So
Hello, everyone. Hi.
there,
Polly's telling her story to Peggy about her awakening.
yeah,
Oh, I just got a part of that. Thank you so much for sharing.
It's
yeah,
just starting right now. Go ahead.
yeah. So I had, as a background, I'd been in a codependent dynamic with my youngest sister, who was 8 years younger than I, and then the same thing with my youngest son, whose father had died when he was 5 years old. So I had this codependency relationship with them. My whole goal in life was to get them okay, because then I thought I'd be fine, right? So it's I call it the era of codependency, that somebody else's well-being depends on me. And even though we go through cycles, like in early childhood or in certain situations where that's true, fundamentally it's not true. Everybody has the true north experience of being on their own behalf. If they come through to that, most people are in some kind of adaptive behavior that has to do with some form of codependency. So in this lifelong dynamic that I was in with my sister, again, who's 8 years younger than I am, and my youngest son, uh, I had my sister and I were with our father when he passed. And when we got the inheritance, we invested it in property in Oregon where my son was growing cannabis. And my sister, unbeknownst to me, because I never had the inclination to smoke anything, had been a lifelong pot user. So she was very inspired by the idea of a family business that had to do with marijuana. Right. And he had a plan to market it and for medical use and for all kinds of things. And so my sister and I invested our inheritance from our father in property for him to do that. The first crop that was going to be harvested the night before, and it was about a $500,000 crop at that time, which was 15 years ago, it got ripped off. It was totally stolen. Every plant was gone. It was just like plowed ground, right? So my son went into guilt and fear. My sister was scared and angry. And I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore, right? It wasn't that clear nor that clean in my experience, but that describes it. And so what I realized was that I was believing something that wasn't true. I'd done the work with Byron Katie. Do you know her, Peggy?
Name.
Do you know the name?
Yeah.
I know the name.
Yeah. Basically, what she teaches is that it's our thinking and our identity with our thoughts that create the difficulties. What she said, if you are suffering, you're believing something that's not true. And I heard her voice in this as this catastrophe developed full body and right in between us all, the three of us. And I asked myself the question, I'm deeply suffering right now. I'd been on a path in which I was able to avoid acknowledging any suffering that I'd had, right? I call it putting sugar over shit for most of my life. And so I had the experience of telling them, I have to go into my own room. I have to have some time apart. And when I was in there, I said, what is it that I'm believing that's not true, that's creating the suffering? And the awareness occurred. You're believing that their well-being depends on you. And that can never be true for any of us. And so what that meant to me as I continued to sit in meditation was that I was in Oregon and was there to support my son and a home for my sister and me together. And I realized what I wanted was to be back on Maui. And so the next day I announced that I would be returning to Maui and wished them well. But so after that, getting back to Maui, I'd always done a kind of coaching. I'd had a business, a consulting firm in Houston, Texas, but always done something rather like this. But once I came back, I started working with people individually. I didn't have the technology that I use now. We call it the 6 steps to freedom process. But I did know that to see what I was believing that wasn't true, which is what the clearing had been for me, that when you see that, there's a real need for forgiving yourself for the error. Right? And so I was using Ho'oponopono for that part of the cycle when I first began to work with people. And so that's kind of the way that's more or less the origin story. And then since then, it's been through different cycles, but was it 5 years ago or 4 years ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago, I returned from 6 months in Brazil, and there was a huge response in South Maui here and in Wailea to the teaching. And so we started doing the small groups, and I was continuing I had probably half a dozen people that I worked with already via phone before I moved back. And moving back, it just was time. The time was right and ripe, I should say, for the response that continues to support this work and the clearing in consciousness that comes from it, which is the most important thing.
One thing you didn't say, or didn't say it the way I've heard it before, is in that moment where you saw the suffering,
Right.
is that you dropped your fear-based self.
That's right. Yeah. When I sat in and saw that I was believing something that wasn't true, what happened was the person, the me that had been caught in the pattern of codependency and in the fear that underpins that fell away. So what waking up is that the fear-based me is dissolved or dispelled. Is that good?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
So basically, you're saying any suffering isn't true? Or
Right, it's based on something that's not true, yeah. And that's kind of a high bar, isn't it? I mean, I understand. Yeah, the way in which, we've been engaged in the reading Paul Levy's book, The Quantum Phenomena, and
Quantum revelation.
The Quantum Revelation. I have another book called, yeah. The New Age community has been talking for decades about how we create our own reality, but how scientifically we actually do has to do with consciousness. It has to do, the fundamental premise is based in the double slit experiment in quantum physics, where the observer affects the observed. And so what we find out is that the way we see reality through whatever distortion field, and the distortion field is typically created by our woundedness. And so if we look out in the world and it looks like she didn't care about me, or he doesn't love me, or they didn't call me back, then I have that reality. If I look out at it differently, then I'll have a different reality. So as viewed, so appears is the whip that comes from the quantum physics, which is a kind of more scientific version of you create your own reality. Who's here? Is that Gio? Hi, Gio. Yeah. So does that make sense to you, Peggy? Yeah.
no, what?
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Mhm. So if there were an origin story about the nature of consciousness turning out to be the problematic issue for most of us, it would be the story of the garden story of the fall, the Adam and Eve story in Eden, and the way in which, in simplistic terms, we fell out of our heart, from which our experience had been connection to the garden and to each other. And we fell into our minds, where we decided that we could name everything, notice the separation of everything, and notice that we were separate from it. And from that place, the judgment began. I like that plant better than that one. I like that person better than that one. And so we're now on a track of individualizing. Instead of experiencing connection, we're experiencing the specificity of our own judgment. So when that is just an origin story, it's just a myth, but it points to exactly where we get caught up in our mind instead of the experience of what the heart offers, which we've been out of touch with for millennia now. Time is not an aspect of the true nature of reality, but it is an aspect of the way human beings count and the way we experience birthdays and a decade here and a century there. Pretty soon you got a whole history. The point in talking about that today is to understand the way in which our reality shows up depends on the experience of being caught, excuse me, in our mind about it. Something can happen, and it either, if you're like me and you don't see it, or you don't notice it, or it's not in your field of awareness, then it doesn't mean anything, right? Of course, now with media and AI and all of that, nothing goes unnoticed, right? We're all confronted all the time with whatever the hell is going on. But when we make it mean something about us, that's the way in which we start to create an experience of being other and of being either better or lesser than. Typically, we assert better than while experiencing lesser than. This is the human condition of self-judgment, right? I'm not good enough. I don't do it right. They're better than me, but I need to assert that whatever it is that I don't believe about myself. So we're caught in a kind of mind-made a dynamic where the pairs of opposites, the polarity, which is a part of the falling out of the heart, which is all one, connected, experiencing the movement and the deliciousness of creation, into the mind where everything's being judged and has to be accounted for, where we're focused and limited, and we experience that shutting down to being able to name it, to handle it, to diagnose it, right? So we are caught still in the mind, which is what we're opening up out of. I do believe that that's what the greatest gift that may be offered by AI will be, this opening that's kind of scary right now, since it seems to know more than we do, which is not a bad thing, because knowing things has never helped us out very much, right? It's like you think you know it, and then it turns upside down, and you're like, that's not the way it should be. Yeah. So we are in the position right now at this intersection of what I call waking up out of the limitation of being outside the garden, where our mind's running the show, where we are seeing a reality through a distortion field, a perceptual field that is informed by our conclusion about ourselves and about others and about the world. It's screwed up, they're screwed up, I'm screwed up, right? It's like, it's a fundamental dissing of all that is. But through that lens, then the only world that we can see and experience is the one that matches that information. This is the quantum phenomena as viewed, so appears. How Anna Isnin, and I thank Janine for my correction on that pronunciation. Anna Isnin said, "We do not see the world as it is, we see the world as we are." And this is just the awareness that many poets, philosophers, and intellectuals have understood for many decades. William Blake said, we have to cleanse the doors of perception. And there are many other examples of that awareness of how we are influencing what our experience is, what our idea of an apparent other might be, right? So when we wake up to our true nature, which is awareness, that's being expressed and experienced through a body-mind unit that has its own, I think of it as the power of limits. It has its own preferences and it has its own gifts and talents. And so we have the fun then of cooperating. But typically what's happened is that out of the fear that came with our perception, and we'll call it the garden, but in that early experience of separation, that fear that got installed there has underpinned everything since then. So when we drop out of our minds and back into our hearts, we're leaving the source of fear, which is the mind, believing that this is good, that's bad, all caught up in judgment and polarity and duality. And we're coming home to our own heart. And from that place, we experience this arising of realities, the wonder of it all. We know it as all arising in our awareness. Knowing oneself as the awareness in which realities arise is like it's like the altar call. If anybody else went to the revivals when they were young kids, like I did, right? I got saved every night. Yeah, Jesus loves me. I'm up here. Give me a, yeah. So I want to be a good girl. Yeah. So it's like this opening of the heart, and then the experience of connection, the experience of the potentiality, the possibility of the duality, the polarities of peace and war, and love and hate collapsing into a new heaven and a new earth. And so that's what we are about here, is to start to understand what's been at play, so that not so that we need to be in opposition to it, but so that in seeing it, the alchemy of seeing something, right? You know, we may think, well, especially with a condition like mine, losing my eyesight through macular degeneration. I can be in a room and in some kind of vague way see something run across the floor, right? It's like, and then I'm like, alert, alert, right? And then I noticed that it was maybe a toy or something else, or it may have been just a very quiet mouse that needed to go outside, not be in my living room. So we have this, the wonder and the miracle of aliveness that we are expressions of. And when we come home to ourselves, because what happened when we didn't get taken care of properly, or we were left alone to cry ourselves to sleep and felt that we were not good enough, whatever that early conclusion was, that's the lens through which we've been seeing reality and creating our experience. And as that clears, then we're connected. We have the experience of what was the early experience of the ones we call Adam and Eve, just me and you, actually, but we call them Adam and Eve, the experience of being connected to the garden, to everything that was arising, and then no need to diagnose it or to dissect it in order to find out how it worked. I can remember when I was taking biology in college, and they wanted us to cut up the frog, and I was like, I'd rather see him hop. You know, I think that's more froggy than taking him apart here. But that's what the mind does. You see, that's a perfect example of what the mind wants to do, is to analyze and diagnose and dissect. And what the heart wants to do is to connect. And so we're coming home to ourselves, to our true nature, which is our heart, and which creates a totally different reality because it's a totally different frequency. And this is a reality, an arising based in frequency. Right? So one of the things that happens when we talk about the distortion field, the lens that has been distorted by my early conclusion, I don't matter, is that I can only see a world in which I don't matter. Nothing that happens out there can convince me otherwise, because I created this distortion field out of my own experience, excuse me, my own conclusion. So you know, it's like, believe it, hell, I can prove it, right? Let me tell you about my life. So we have this opportunity to go meta to what looks like cause and effect, realizing that cause and effect keeps us at the level of the problem. So the opportunity to have a larger vision, more possibility, and more options is the opening into a new reality. So today we'll do the work with anybody who is interested in doing that. We'll use the 6 steps and see what we can do together to be happier, freer, more peaceful. Everything that we aspire to, we are already that. So what we're doing here together is taking away what's not that. It's like Michelangelo said that he found a lump of marble in which the David existed, and he just took away the excess marble. And there was the David. So what we're doing is taking away and dispelling the error of our conclusions that were for most of us made when pre-verbally, when we felt the energy of they don't care about me, or I'm not getting fed on time, or whatever it was. This is quite a mystery, magical reality in the way that it works. But our job is to find out how it works on behalf of a larger possibility of oneness and love and connection, instead of how it works in opposition and in what would we call it? Yeah, that word, polarization. Yes, thank you, Deborah. So who's up?
So if you're in the room, you can raise your hand. If you're in the Zoom room, you can either raise your hand or raise your hand, and I will spotlight you if you're on Zoom. So questions, topics. Yeah, Colleen.
Hi, Polly.
Hi, sweetheart.
Robin, if you could turn off the recording,
Okay,
thank you.
sure.
Uh,
Hang on, give me a second.
sure.
Sandra, hang on 1 second. Let me get you spotlighted. And I'm not sure I said your name correctly. Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Who's
I'm
that?
Chandri Barrett. My friend, my therapist, Susan Frieda, referred me to you, and I'm very glad she did.
Me?
So I'm painfully aware of this distortion field, and that repression turns into projection and cleansing the doors of perception. And you know, I mean, as young as 5 years old, I was very proud of myself because I had built a Pepsodent shield around myself. I grew up in a very violent home, and I thought that was great. I had a shield around myself, and that's kind of how I lived until very recently that I realized maybe the Pepsodent shields, maybe it's time to come down. So my question is how to break through that. I mean, I'm painfully aware of it all the time. You know, my judgment, I'm a New Yorker. I judge everything. You know, and I know it doesn't do me any good, and I understand separation. I understand all of this. I mean, I've read books. I understand this in my head. But how do I break through it? I lived a year in India. I go to yin yoga at night. I mean, I have some tools, but I really just would like to know how to sort of smash through that distortion field and get back to that where
Right.
everything is one. And so if there are tools, if there's a handbook, there's a guidebook, something.
Yeah, well, you know, there is a shift in perception, which is what waking up is. It's a shift in perception, so that you're talking about the distortion lens that you know was initially, it's what protected you, right?
Right.
So that you created the shield so that you were protected. What it kept you from being was connected to both yourself and to the possibility of connecting with others. It was not safe in your early upbringing to be connected to these others. And so, you know, it was the intelligence, the psychological intelligence of this incarnating being that kept you that way. I feel your willingness to be whole. I feel your willingness to let that go. But one of the things that often shows up is that we actually get a lot out of our wounded protection shield. And we have to, you know, it's like, it literally does. And this, I was just talking earlier in this afternoon session about my awakening, and it really did, it cost me everything. I walked away from money and family and everything because it was all of a sudden I was unwilling to continue to participate in a lie. So at the heart of the matter of this shield that you've created is a lie. It's probably a lie about yourself, about what you concluded it meant about you when you were in an unsafe early environment. I suspect that's at the heart of the matter here. You may have already come upon this doing the work, all the work that you've done, but this conclusion about yourself creates the distortion lens through which you have created this shield, this protection, this separation. Do you know what that early wound conclusion was?
There was violence all around me. I mean, my parents were constantly screaming at each other. They were screaming at my sister. The screaming was not necessarily towards me. I was the golden child. The screaming was just all around me.
Right.
And so, it was just too, I mean, physically difficult. I'm also a sexually abused child from my father. That's another issue. But, just not being able to trust anyone or anything in my environment, until I went to school, and then I was the good girl and got good grades and scholarships and fellowships and all of that, to find a safe place. But my home was never a safe place.
Right. Yeah. When the home is not a safe place, the child unavoidably believes something that it's their fault. It's just the nature of us as freshly incarnated beings, that whatever's happening looks like it's either a part of us or it's about us. And if what's happening is bad, if it's impacting us in the way that you're describing, you're believing something about yourself. I don't think you're in touch with it. You may be.
I don't know, just an insecurity,
Mhm.
just being
I'm not safe.
right, being totally insecure.
Okay.
And
So let me ask you this, and this is a free associate. What might be true about someone who's not safe? They must be.
I don't know if I personalized it.
Mhm.
It was like, I couldn't come home with success because my sister was failing. It was always just sort of a lack of, I won't even say love, just a lack of recognition, a lack of acknowledgement, a lack of, hello, I'm a person here.
Right.
Uh, I don't know if I blame myself for it.
Right, but you believed something, I suspect you believed something about yourself. It's not about blame, but it is about a conclusion of sorts. Like if you're not getting the recognition when you bring home the paper because you're going to hide it because you don't want to upstage your sister, or you're not, that you're spared from the angry fighting that's going on. When all that was happening, you didn't feel safe, but you also believed it meant something about you. This is not necessarily a self judgment, but it is a conclusion about myself.
Well, yeah, no, I was never good enough. I've got 99 on a test. It had to be 100. It was never good enough.
And that's your own self-judgment that got installed out of this environment that you've described. That's exactly what it is, Chandra. It's your own self-judgment. It's like, no matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in order to.
Well, because I couldn't fix them.
Right. Exactly. Right. What kind of girl are you that you can't fix everybody in your family? You know, you couldn't, you see, that's the thing. It all falls on us as children. The whole world only has to do with us. We feel the impact of the others and all of the craziness and all of that, but it's still about us. And that I'm not good enough is what got installed. That is the distortion lens through which you've seen reality. You see the men that are attracted to you. You see your children, maybe the children in your life who are not taking care of their mother later on or whatever. That's excuse that piece. That was not good. But
That's an issue.
I thought it was. Yeah. Anyway, it's like, you know, it's all about me in the sense that we create the way in which we perceive reality, and perception is reality. And when you see it as I can't measure up, I'm not good enough, then that distortion field informs everything that comes into your awareness. Even if it goes to the other end of the stick, like, these people are so beneath me, right? I mean, it's on that polarity of I'm not good enough and I am the best thing that ever happened. But the whole thing is that it's just a lie that was unavoidably concluded with this early experience, right? The craziness of that early experience.
So how to break through that? How to break through that? How to touch that? How to find that? And
the 6 steps is that let me ask you this. When you're triggered, are you aware that you're being triggered because it's triggering within you the conclusion, I'm not good enough? Is that available to you? When you have
all the time. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
that conclusion is what got installed, right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing, or the other person. It doesn't matter. It's always the same.
Exactly. That's right. And so right now, what the shift in perception is that you can see that. I think of it as like the crawl at the bottom of the CNN screen. Now you are, as awareness, you are seeing this conclusion. I'm not good enough. And that becomes the object. You are now experiencing yourself as awareness of that. Whereas prior, you've believed that was true about you, right? It didn't seem like it was a choice. It didn't seem like it was a conclusion. It seemed like that's the truth about me.
Right. And I would work extra hard to make everybody love me, this codependent thing, it's like.
Yeah, we've got the game at that point because we've got this distortion in the lens of how our reality shows up. Your reality will show up that other people agree with you that you're not good enough. Or they'll project onto you that you should be their savior. Perhaps it can go most any way. But the point is, it's a creation. You are the awake awareness in which this reality arises, including your body-mind, the vehicle through which you express in a 3D reality, right? But this early conclusion, I'm not good enough, has been the lens through which you've perceived reality and through which reality impacts you.
Right. So how do I get to the next step? How do I blow away this distortion field? I'm very conscious of it. I'm painfully conscious of it.
Well, the question is, are you conscious that it's not who you are, but what you have? Because that's a distinction that makes.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah. When we conclude, the conclusion is like, It's like an installation of a program, right? And now it's running. And so everything is informed by, I'm not good enough. It could have been something else. That's what, see, that awareness of how, it's not exactly arbitrary what you concluded, because there's something about you and about your circumstances and so forth that emerged for you. But it could have been something else. So that just gives you a bit of a handle on the reality that it's a creation. You could have a different label on you, right? Like, I'm not pretty enough.
Oh, that too. Yeah, all of those. I'm not thin enough, I'm not fat enough, I'm not this enough, I'm not, yeah, all of that.
Not enough ones, right? You could have had one on there that has to do with intelligence. You don't have I'm not intelligent enough, do you?
A little bit. I came to the end of my intelligence with calculus and things like that.
Yeah.
I realize there are some things his brain's just not made to understand.
Yeah, but the point is that these are to some degree, not totally, but to some degree arbitrary in the way. So it's like my glasses, right? It's like an object. I'm not good enough. And now it's the lens through which I see everything, and everything that shows up proves.
Right, right, right. Takes you back to the circle that you started. Yeah.
That's right. So we have total access to dispelling what's been running the show.
How?
You can see it, you know you installed it, you can friggin' let it go. You can let it go. If you put it in there, you can let it go. You're the only one who can. Out here is never going to be good enough for you to feel good enough. So it's like, I made it, I can see it. The light of conscious awareness on this conclusion can dispel it. That's the only thing that can, actually. The awareness that this was a conclusion that could have been something different. It could have not occurred at all, in which case I would have had a different experience in my life and of myself. Awake awareness shines like the sun on mold on this conclusion, I'm not good enough. And it absolutely eradicates it. It's just not true. It's like you without that, feel what that would feel like. You without that, alive in your life and without that, how would everything enlighten and change and become happy?
Yeah. Well, and the end of the insecurity,
Yeah, the freedom there. It's like you are set free. I sometimes say it's a Southwest airline commercial. You're now free to move around your life on your own behalf. And it is just the deliciousness of it. Seeing it.
I've had flashes.
Good.
I've had flashes when my heart is so full that it's going to break and the room disappear. I mean, I've had flashes.
Yeah.
But what I don't know how to do is to get back there. I don't know how to get back to my heart where it's so full that it can't hold. And
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm not good enough is nowhere to be found.
no, that's
Yeah. So it's like to keep allowing that to happen. See it and let it dispel. See it, bring it up. Like, I've always believed I'm not good enough. And you may have circumstances that match that more likely than others, and see that was the label you put on it when that happened, right? Keep doing this work of seeing anything that you can see, you're not it, right? Does that one land?
it landed. No, if I can get behind it, just to get behind it.
Yes, exactly. Right. I can,
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. That's
hold on just a minute.
About forgiveness. What
That's what she,
So I haven't heard you mention anything
good.
about.
Yeah, Janine is suggesting that we go to forgiveness. I forgive myself for ever having believed I don't matter. I'm not good enough. Is that available to you?
I don't know. Is it? I don't know.
If you can, if you can see this label that you concluded, this conclusion, and you can allow it to fall away, that's the forgiveness. I forgive the bright light of awake awareness shining on this conclusion is the forgiveness. I forgive myself for ever having believed that I'm not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the sixth step, which thank you, Janine, for reminding me, is forgiveness. I often
Right.
just describe it as the awake awareness shining on the conclusion. I forgive myself for ever having believed I'm not good enough. That's what you continue to absorb and reside in. See through the distortion of I'm not good enough.
I'm starting to realize that everything that I thought and everything I was taught, I don't want to say is wrong, but is wrong. Like, you have to be perfect. You have to do this. You have to excel. You have to da 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 da.
It's not right or wrong. It's just not true.
Not true.
Not true.
Not
And
true.
that understanding is the frequency of forgiveness. When you get that what you had concluded was never true. I forgive myself for ever having believed that.
I forgive myself for ever having believed that.
Mhm.
Working on it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. Thank you, Janine.
I just have one more thing to say.
Please.
Chandra, I'm talking to you as a fellow New Yorker.
All right.
Who's saying, and somebody who is very adept verbally and mentally, that the hardest part of what Pali teaches for me is coming into my heart. Is actually coming out of
Yeah.
my very smart, very sharp, very quick mind and coming into my heart to feel the one who believed that she wasn't good enough, to actually feel her, feel it from the mind into the heart, into the feeling. And from there, as Polly has mentioned to me hundreds of times, and I still need to be reminded, from there comes the forgiveness.
Mm.
All right, because my mind was the safe place. My heart was so broken that who's going to go there? So, if I can put it in my mind and do some geometry, great.
Right, exactly. But that kid, that broken-hearted kid, as Polly says, I'm sorry to put Polly's words into your mouth, Polly.
Please.
But, but to be the one that you be the one she's been waiting for, to see her, to know she is good enough. Is that how you would say it? You say it.
I love
Take
it.
it away, Polly girl.
No, you are the one that the little one who was wounded, has been waiting for. And you, as the awareness of the truth of who I am, knowing oneself is that. That's great, Janine. Thank you. Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you.
So we have 5 more minutes before we pause and shift into 45 minutes of silent meditation. Is there any last question? Yeah, Robert.
This will be quick. Earlier, Polly, you brought up the point of having an open heart. Is there anything that you could share that would help us with that?
Yeah, what Janine just shared is really the trick to that, because the heart closed to protect the child. And so when you get in touch with that wounded child who believes I'm not good enough or I'm not the one, then to bring that into the heart space. I sometimes think about sitting the little child on the lap of awake awareness, which is who each of us is, to sit the little child there and say, I am the one you've been waiting for, and I am here for you now, and you are loved, you are happy, you're everything that you ever wanted. I am the one you were waiting for, and I am with you. So that is the heart healer that Janine's pointing to, which I do think is often the impasse for people, because we are so mind focused and want to be able to do the work at the level of the mind. You know, I mean, that's what I was able to do for 70 years and avoid my own heart and my own self-abandonment. So we're coming home to ourselves, and that is the opening into our hearts.
Well,
Yes, darling.
Robert, there's a huge body of Buddhist meditations on opening your heart and forgiving yourself and metta and loving kindness, and a lot of that's available online. Jack Cornfield, Tara Brach, I can help you find them or anybody else find them. It's one of the great geniuses of Buddhist psychology is that there's actually mechanisms for dealing with your thoughts in a disciplined way. Western psychology really doesn't have similar processes that I'm aware of.
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Jim.
Thank
Except,
you.
except that Western psychology is now taking all the tools and calling it, Western psychology, but.
You know, if
really
people
was-
want, I can send out some, I mean, do we have a group? Do we have a group for this sign?
Need a text
Yes.
thread?
Text
Yes.
group? Yes,
Text thread, yeah.
okay, I could send out a couple.
I don't think I'm on it.
I can put it into the email that goes out to everybody.
Well, that would be a very idea.
Great.
Mhm.
Did you have
said
something
could
else,
do it?
Robert?
Robert, you can,
I'm sorry.
I'll put it
heard-
in the
did you
email
have
I
something
send out
else?
weekly.
do you want me to give you the links?
I was just thanking Gio.
Polly, I'd like just to say something for what's her name? Chandri and for Robert and for all of us for the end of the 6 steps when I say that I forgive myself forever believe that I'm not good enough because that's all humanity going through that per se. And when I say I know who I am the awake awareness where the life unfold in front of me. In that moment, feel that in our heart. That is a huge step also because it's not just I forgive myself, but I need to put something on place of that belief that I had before that I'm not good enough. And now I'm go back. I am the awake awareness that is creating this reality here, and allow that to vibrate in our heart. How it's feel to be the awake awareness that create this reality here to our vibration. That is one path that I'm using to go to my heart using the 6 steps. And when I say I forgive myself forever, believe blah, 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 something that's not true about myself, and say the second part of the 6 steps, I know who I am. I am the awake awareness or the child of God, wherever the perfection of the creator of all it is, and allow that to sink on my heart. I feel like sometimes help a lot to embody that new belief system and open my heart.
Thank you, sweetheart. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's always to bring it home. Home is the heart. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that I've done all the Buddhist meditations, and for me, the seeing of the truth is the heart opening. It's like what you said, Chandri, that yeah, there's no more judgment. There's no more the conclusion is gone. It's not a mental thing. It happens in the heart. The
Okay.
polarity dissolves in the heart when we see the truth from awareness. It happens. There's no other place to go. It is the is of it. That's my experience with the 6 steps.
Yeah, I think it's really,
And that's the safety, that's the ultimate safety,
yeah,
is us being there for ourselves,
truly.
not abandoning ourselves, but fully awake and aware.
Yeah.
And that's that inner place of ease, resolution, that's the safety. It's our inner safety, our true inner safety.
That's really true, Dominique, because it's in that place that when we haven't believed that we're good enough or that no one shows up for us, we are really experiencing showing up for us. We're
And
experiencing,
you had it in like one big
I did. Yeah.
hurrah. And in Buddhism, they talk about there's the slow path. Most of us are on the slow path, and we do it in little pieces. Some people have that spontaneous kind of woohoo, and some of us have to like come into our heart, have our heart, feel that heart broken over and over again. It's not a one time.
But it's worth the price of admission. Whatever that is, yeah.
It's called the interminable path.
Okay, we are at the bottom of the hour. I wanted to remind people that Polly offers her wisdom through donation. There's a basket at the back of the table, and that there is Venmo and PayPal. Please offer from your heart. And yeah, thank you so much.